Hey everyone, welcome. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. My name is Matt Marriott. I am the Director of Growth at Labra, and I'm very excited to be joined by my colleague and Director of Alliances and Strategic Partnerships, Barbara Trevino. Thanks for being here. Uh, so we're obviously coming off the energy of Google Next, and it's very clear there's a lot of momentum in the ecosystem. So what we're trying to do here today is unpack what that means for ISVs. So, Barbara, what made now the right time to bring this conversation to the table?
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you for having me today, Matt. And while I wasn't at Google Next, I definitely feel the momentum coming out of the event, and it's really hard to ignore. And I think right now, ISVs have a real opportunity to align more strategically with Google and ultimately unlock more meaningful growth in the process. And you and I know, and we've seen firsthand that winning with Google requires more than just a marketplace listing. And so that really just takes some operational precision, some seller alignment, and of course, a clear path to value. And so today we're going to break down what's working, where teams get stuck, and ultimately how Labra can help remove friction and how ISVs can scale a lot faster with Google.
Great. So let's start with a quick reality check. Obviously, Google does not have a formal co-sell program like Amazon and Microsoft have. So how should ISVs think about building a partnership with Google?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Google doesn't have necessarily the same program as the other hyperscalers. They are a little different. And while there isn't really a formalized co-sell structure like Amazon's ISV Accelerate or Microsoft's IP co-sell program, it doesn't mean that it is much less strategic. And we're seeing actually a huge surge in interest in the market, especially with ISVs who are interested in unlocking optimization and modernization through marketplace with industry alignment and ultimately getting a lot closer to Google's field. And so I guess you can say that the reality is that Google's system is, or really ecosystem is still evolving. And that I think is where there's real opportunity for a lot of ISVs. We're seeing a lot of dedicated co-sell teams and more marketplace go-to-market motions and a lot of seller aligned programs that are starting and beginning to take shape. But this is where I think ISVs can't and really shouldn't sit back and wait for these programs to take place. I think ISVs that are ready and are ready now need to come with a plan, come with clear messaging, come with operational readiness, and ultimately a motion that Google sellers can engage with right now, even before a fully structured model takes place.
So with that in mind, what do you think the biggest misconception that you hear when companies say that they're partnering with Google?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions, but in the space that we're in, I think the most important misconception or the biggest one that we hear is that being listed on Google Marketplace or just enrolling in their partner program, Google Partner Advantage is enough. And the reality of that is that it's not. And listing is and will always be usually just the start of that journey, but it really comes down to how you activate and how you activate around your Google strategy. So ultimately, Google sellers really care about relevance. If there's an industry fit, if there's customer use cases, and if there are, and that leads to strategic outcomes. So when you show up with the clear go-to-market motion and also have the right operational support, it's much easier for Google to be willing and to actively engage.
So practically speaking, what does that look like? In your opinion, what is a strong Google go-to-market motion?
That is a really good question, and ultimately, in practice, that just means, and I think that especially those already working with Google or have expressed interest in Google, we see a lot of companies that are starting to engage with Google because they already have engaged with Amazon or Microsoft, and the biggest gap that there usually is in this transition period is that there's a clear missing strategy. So naturally, one would think expanding into Google will be the natural and next step of their evolution with marketplace or just their journey from a hyperscaler perspective. But it's only important and it only matters if the foundation is there. And so what that ultimately means when you are actively engaging in a strong go-to-market motion with Google, what that entails is there strong leadership buy-in? Did the company think about product fit for Google Cloud? Does the tech stack support that cloud and even potentially a multi-cloud environment? And ultimately, are the sales teams that you are supporting engaged and know how to work with Google and Google field reps? So that is obviously all important from a business and a strategic and a go-to-market evolution, but you really also have to consider it as a holistic business model that ultimately will support not just the partnership, but even the things that you're doing from a marketplace and operations standpoint. So think of it as not just another channel, but it's truly a commitment to working with Google in a full-fledged partnership. And so it really just means to show up with alignment, with investment, and the right operational fit.
So what are some signals that people should look for that show that an ISV is on the right track?
Oh man, there's a lot of signals, but I think that activation is the number one signal. Getting listed and being listed is not a signal, but I think activation is the most important. So when you're starting to see a little bit more of that go-to-market activation where you're sharing mutual accounts with your Google counterparts, where you're tracking that impact and you're enabling them with strong messaging. It's important to realize and recognize and to treat Google like a strategic partner and not just another cloud provider that you need to check off your list. It's really, really critical to recognize that and lean into it. And ultimately, when you shift that perspective and that model, it makes a tremendous difference.
So let's speak a little bit about the other side of the coin when things can break down. What would you say causes a promising Google partnership to stall out?
That is a really, really great topic. And I'm going to double click on that because usually it comes down to misalignments. I think companies jump in with real interest when it comes to Google, but there's sometimes not a real investment or a real plan to do that. Sure, they can get listed and they can register opportunities, but then nothing happens. There's not a real go-to-market plan. There's no sales enablement, and there's really no internal clarity on how this fits into the broader business. And I'll give you an example. In my past life, I've supported organizations that, especially now, are Google and recognized Google Partners of the Year. And ultimately, that was a motion that took a lot of effort from an operational standpoint, an infrastructure standpoint, a go-to-market standpoint. And it was much more than just signing a partner agreement with Google and getting listed. It took a full year to get to that point. And so it's definitely no easy fit or feat rather, and it definitely can get a little tricky, and you'll ultimately get stuck when some of those areas aren't defined or when some of those things aren't connected into the broader business operating model.
Okay, so when a company recognizes that they are stuck in that place, what would you say is the first thing they should do?
I think when companies get to a position when they're not seeing a lot of traction with growing with Google, or really just stuck when it comes to some of these areas that I've covered, it's really important to pause and realign. it's really important to understand and ask, why are you even doing this? And even see where you've seen some success and maybe where you see some challenges. And it's really, really important then to build around that. It's important to have your message right. It's important to have your sales teams enabled and strongly invested in co-selling. And ultimately, too, when it comes to operations, tightening up your marketplace operations, your co-sell pipeline, and making sure that that is all buttoned up, because once you get that right, once you've given yourself time to assess where the gaps are and address them rather than to continue the cycle, when you have it all tied up and you've actioned on all those things, then it gives Google a little bit more of a reason to want to care. It makes it a lot easier if you're meeting them halfway with a lot of these areas already covered and already addressed, and have a really strong alignment. And ultimately, once you make it easier for Google to work with your organization and your business, then they'll want to bring you into the right conversations.
Okay, that's really helpful. So let's shift to solutions and allow ourselves to be a little bit self-serving. And let's talk about how Labra fits into this equation.
Yeah, of course. Well, I know we've talked about right now best practices when it comes to partnering with Google, and partnering can mean a lot of different things. And we've talked about all those areas across the go-to-market organization, but operationalizing your model with Google is extremely and equally as important. And so that is where Labra comes into the equation. So Labra can ultimately help ISVs that are not just preparing to partner with Google or already have an existing partnership with Google, but Labra is the binder of it all. We're helping bring it all together, where it's marketplace readiness, partner engagement, and ultimately visibility into what's working. And so one of the things that might actually fit into this conversation, and we've heard a lot about this down the pipe, and I personally am very excited about this, coming from an operations background where in the past, working with Google meant having to download reports from the CRM and then share that via Google Sheets with my counterparts in Google, because even at the time, they didn't even have a partner portal. The most exciting thing that we've been really building is our CRM connector, and it's designed specifically to support the next evolution of co-selling with Google. It's not live yet, but it is coming soon, and it's being built essentially to serve as the glue between your systems, your go-to-market motions, and your revenue engine. And so that is ultimately the most exciting thing about where Labra fits into the solution, apart from just marketplace and being a cloud agnostic provider and supporting companies of all different shapes and sizes, whether or not they are already listed on Google or would like to get listed on Google, or even just centralize their cloud go-to-market journey across all clouds. The co-sell connector here is the biggest and most important advantage to Labra.
Do you mind elucidating a bit more on that and get into some of the specifics about how that will work?
Yeah, of course. So Google is preparing to roll out their native CRM connector, and we have been a part of that journey from the very, very beginning. This will ultimately help a lot of ISVs that are listed on Marketplace and actively co-selling with Google track seller engagement and be able to manage all of the partner influence pipeline and then be able to tie it back to revenue. So if you're really leaning into Google and are starting to build that pipeline, make sure that you watch a little bit closely about how all of this will roll out, because in the end, it ultimately does mean that if you are already working with Google and managing pipeline, that just means in the future you're not going to be doing manual opportunity registrations. You no longer need to log into Partner Advantage and register an opportunity and then enter all of the fields. All of that will be fully automated with the CRM connector.
So I think that does a great job of transitioning us pretty naturally to the next talking point, which is automation. Everyone knows that multi-cloud instances and managing multi-cloud is a bit of a mess. Where do you think automation can make the biggest difference in that?
Oh man, Matt, you would know just as good as I from an operational background, but automation is truly what makes a lot of the magic work behind the scenes. It's what ultimately makes a lot of this management process really possible to scale, especially when you're working with a provider like Google and also other hyperscalers in that process. It's important to automate, especially when you're juggling multiple partner programs, when you're engaging with hundreds of field sales reps, and you're adopting a lot more system processes and you're evolving your business. It can be really tricky to manage it all, and ultimately that will also be a manual process that can break down very, very fast if you're not ahead of automation. And it's important to recognize that Labra can help connect those dots. So Labra, and think of Labra as your one-stop shop to centralize all of your cloud go-to-market operation model and automating it. So it can really help you manage your marketplace practice. It can help you scale your go-to-market motion. It can help you effectively manage your co-sell pipeline and syncing that back with your CRM, regardless of which cloud provider you're listed with or co-selling with. And you can actually be able to track influence and being able to report back to your business and see where you are able to remove the friction of doing all of these things manually and siloed and just have it in one platform. And I think that is very, very important. Having that kind of visibility is very mission critical when you're running high stakes motions with Google's with Google's leadership team, with your own leadership team, and building that partnership from the ground up.
So you touched on it a bit there, but what do you think are some of the major risks if you stay managing all of this manually?
That there's a lot of risks. And I want to double click on that. And knowing from personal experience, you can lose a lot of leverage. So for example, if you are managing the marketplace motion with Google, that means having to log into Google's portal, managing the pipeline and making sure that that is mapping and reflecting correctly on your own internal CRM. It can become a bottleneck or really a gap if you don't have someone staying 100% on top of that pipeline. And that ultimately, if you're doing that process very, very manually, it can still lead to a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of misalignment between the cloud field teams and your own sales teams, and it can make it even harder to co-sell. So it's very, very important to have an automation, a process, a platform in place that can help you and eliminate a lot of those manual cycles, and then ultimately also help reduce some of that friction and burnout that your sales teams might be experiencing from having to work with Google, because the operations and the automations are all still very manual of a process. So automation can really help create and turn it into a full system. And if you are still doing these things manually, then it can ultimately really impact your business in a negative way. And so if you think about it, staying manual will really, really prevent you from moving forward, even accelerating your partnership with Google, or even having any actionable results from having a strong strategy in place, regardless if it's marketplace related or co-sell related. And at the end of the day, it's really important to just shift your mind and shift to thinking larger and long tail and strategic long term, and go from a manual motion to a more automated, mature process as your team evolves, as your company grows with Google, and as you become more mature. And that is ultimately the shift that will make the biggest difference and will really make a much bigger impact in the long run.
Thank you. That makes total sense. So one last question here. Obviously, we've talked about a lot in this short time, but what would be your kind of main takeaway, your biggest takeaway that you want people to leave with?
Partnering. Actually, let me think about that one. The biggest takeaway I want people to leave with today is that partnering with Google is a strategic decision, and it is one that is worth doing right. It's not just a plug and play. I think that's also a misconception. And that's okay. It's how you show up and how you enable your teams and how you build the right infrastructure, and not just participate in Google's program, but lead the programs and come ready and come prepared, come with a strategic play in mind and execute it. And ultimately, I think it's the ISVs that are listening right now that are going through this journey. If you invest in this wholeheartedly and strategically now, then you will be in a much stronger position than the ISVs that are waiting for Google to programatize some of these motions that are starting to take shape. And so at the end of the day, it just means that you'll be more than ready and be extremely ready by the time those programs are available and being at the forefront of working with Google.
Yeah, I mean, proactive versus reactive, right? I think that's something that we all could take to heart. Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you everyone for joining us today. If you want to learn more about how we at Labra help ISVs scale with Google and beyond all the other clouds, please visit us at our new website, which has the same address, labra.io. And just know we're, of course, here to help you move faster, sell smarter, and scale bigger. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.